Hey, this is Ms. Cooper here with your week 7 review. So, at week 7, we have come a long way since week 1, and many of our objectives have tied together. Every objective in a social studies class is going to tie together because history is a cycle. So, we want to start you with the objectives for our chapter 1 through 3 that dealt with the age of absolutism and the monarch system, the divine rights of kings, all of the ideas that had come from the Middle Ages and even the older world orders. Those things inspired leaders and monarchs to rule with an iron fist, to become very tyrannical in many cases, extravagant, with an example being Louis XIV and the Palace of Versailles. And then challenges to those movements, challenges to absolutism. And it erupted in what we called revolutions. And we saw several. We saw the English Revolution. We saw the American Revolution was first. We saw the English Revolution. We saw the French Revolution. And we saw a series of change basically because of Enlightenment thinkers and things that had taken place during the period called the Renaissance. So people changed their way of thinking about leadership and government and what they should expect from it. So that was chapters 1, 2, and 3. And then as we moved into chapters 4, 5, 6, even 7, where we are now, we began to look at, so what happens after those revolutions that we mentioned earlier? Another revolution, the Industrial Revolution, comes, and machines take over humans' jobs, and people get mad about it. They don't necessarily take over, but they're replacing human labor. Manual labor is replaced by machinery. And people like the Luddites got mad and tore machines up. Riots took place. Unions formed to protest working conditions, because even though the Industrial Revolution had a lot of positive benefits, people made a lot of money. People were getting jobs in these factories, and there were some positive things that took place. People would leave rural areas and go to cities and find these jobs in the factories. But we found that in the factories, the working conditions were horrible in many cases. They were working children. They were working women around the clock. There were these 12 and 14-hour work days, 6 days a week. And then laws had to come into play to regulate, and businesses didn't want to get regulated. And there was a laissez-faire, hands-off government approach that eventually gets protested, or gets some contradiction in time. But that's in terms of objectives, chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, even to where we are now, 7. And going back from 7 to even 6, where we were looking at these large empires geographically. How does the Industrial Revolution affect the world? So from 7, where we were looking at Asia, 6, we were looking at the Middle East, and we were discussing the Ottoman Empire. Even 5, where we were dealing with these major inventions of the Industrial Revolution that kind of spanned the globe, because these inventions, such as the spinning jenny, these inventions that made steel easier to produce, the Henry Bessemer and the Bessemer process, and the assembly line with Henry Ford and the Model T. Those were things that really changed the dynamic of world history and created a few other situations, namely the situation we were in with chapter 7, even 6 and 7, imperialism. This is what comes. Chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7, where we are, all deal with the emergence and the expansion of the Industrial Revolution and the geographic, social, and political implications that resulted from it. So we were dealing with this issue of imperialism, because people are making products quicker and faster and making a lot of money off of these products. They need new markets. They need new people to sell these products to. And they hope to continue to make the products cheap They hope to continue to charge what they want to charge, and they definitely need a lot of people to buy these things. So there were these moments where European countries, including the United States, who's not Europe, but from the European world or the European mindset, let's think about it like that, because the United States does what Great Britain does. At this point in time, they want to go out and get an empire because everybody else is getting an empire. So we should have colonies. We should have off territory. We should have lands that are outside of our natural borders. We should get territory that's not within our reach. We should go over somewhere and start getting things, or at least doing business with people. And this is today we call it a global society where we still go overseas and we still communicate with people all over the world, buy and sell, and continue commerce. The global market, that's, yeah, very much what was happening. But the way things are being done now are much more appropriate, because if you just go force yourself into someone's country and make demands, and then when they don't meet your demands, or when they don't accept your gifts or the things that you want to trade, we had things like the Opium Wars, where the British went into China and wanted to trade, and the Chinese did not want to trade, and the British sort of forced themselves in there by smuggling in this addictive substance called opium, and pretty much got the whole country addicted. And it was just an awful, awful situation. 2 wars. So let's go back to what's on your review list. Then I'll quickly go through items so that you can be prepared for your week 7 quiz. It's open note and comprehensive. So just make sure you're ready for it. You've got all your stuff. So from chapter 1, we had the Palace of Versailles, the Petition of Right, the Divine Right of Kings, the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, the Restoration, Oliver Cromwell, Louis XIV, Cardinal Richelieu, Cardinal Mazarin, Ivan the Terrible, Peter the Great, Frederick William, Queen Elizabeth I, and the 30 Years' War. Those were all the highlights from chapter 1. Chapter 2, we went to Rene Descartes, John Locke, rationalism, empiricism, the scientific method, Francis Bacon, inductive reasoning, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Diderot. Diderot is the one that was responsible for the encyclopedia. Don't forget that. Montesquieu, I think, therefore I am. The philosophe, Isaac Newton. The philosophes, laissez-faire, that means hands off. The Magna Carta, that's the document that influenced the United States Constitution. Mary Wollstonecraft, who was an advocate for women's rights. The Declaration of Rights and Grievances. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And I'll go back and give some additional information about Montesquieu. I want you to look at your notes to make sure that I didn't misspeak between Montesquieu and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, because those two names sometimes even may get me confused, but they're in the notes. And I'm basically just going down the list. So this list is definitely a part of things that were in your notes from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 7. So Montesquieu and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, make sure you go back and review what your notes say about those two. Mozart is a classical musician. Then John Wesley is associated with the Methodist Church. The Bastille, chapter 3, we started talking about the French Revolution, the storming of the Bastille, the first, second, and third estates. The first estate is the clergy or the church. The second estate is the nobility. The third estate is the bourgeoisie and the common people. The third estate had to pay all their taxes. The second estate could get out of paying their taxes. They had to pay them, but they could get out of paying their taxes, which meant they weren't paying them. The first estate was exempt from taxes. They did not have to pay them. Which estate had to pay taxes and which did not, I just explained it. The bourgeoisie were important and they were upset. That was the estate that was upset. They were the ones that pushed forward with storming the Bastille and overthrowing the monarch and getting the king's head cut off and getting his wife's head cut off. All of that. The National Assembly comes together. It's like a governing body at the time. The church was not really happy with some of the reforms because a lot of land was taken away from the church, and this was in France in chapter 3. Napoleon was born in Corsica, Italy. That was the name of the city and the place where he was born, when he was born. Yes, it has a new name, but we're using the information from the notes and the videos. So go with Corsica, Italy. He rose to power as a military leader. Josephine was his wife. He divorces her for political reasons. He sets up plebiscites and meritocracies. Okay, the plebiscite was like a democratic forum. A meritocracy is giving merit or giving a rise in status due to good things that you're doing. He's defeated at Waterloo. Chapter 4, the Industrial Revolution, Josiah Wedgwood and pottery. The Spinning Jenny. There's James Watt, Thomas Newcomb, Richard Trevithick, and George Stephenson. Those were names that dealt with the pottery industry. There's the textile industry. The Spinning Jenny is connected to the textile mills. Okay, that was a better way to weave cloth. Then there was James Watt, Newcomb, Trevithick, and Stephenson. Those names were dealing with between the steel, the steam engine, and the railway engine. So make sure you look at your notes for the steam engine, steel, the railway industry. Make sure you look at the names for that. Henry Bessemer is a part of that as well. The new elite that's going to come up there, that's 5% of the population, but they owned a larger percent of land and wealth. Look at your notes for that. Let's see. The Mines Act, 1842. Let's get the date straight. The Factory Act, 1819. Okay, keep those dates straight. The ideas of communism connected to the Communist Manifesto with Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. The Utopian Community, the name Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, David Ricardo, Thomas Malthus, Adam Smith. Those are names that are in the chapter 5 information that you need to be very familiar with. Cubism, Impressionism, and Naturalism. That's on your chapter 5 study guide. So make sure you go back to that and review that. Samuel Slater, that's the name, it's there. The difference between communism and socialism. What do unions do? Explain what a strike is. What is capitalism? Utilitarianism, that's in notes from chapter 5. Then we got to chapter 6. We were dealing primarily with the Ottoman Empire, and major questions dealt with what is a jihad, Murad, Mehmed, Suleiman. Okay, those are names. Murad, Mehmed, and Suleiman. Need to make sure you know those names. Those were leaders. Explain what you know about them based off what's in your notes. How do the Ottomans treat Christians? Okay, make sure you go back to the outline that I gave you for that. Reasons that the Ottoman Empire declined. Ethnic groups in the Ottoman Empire. And the European military campaigns that were called the Crusades. Very important. Then in chapter 7, we dealt with the decline of the Qin dynasty. We talked about the Opium Wars. We talked about the Boxer Rebellion. There was a bell ring about the Taiping Rebellion. War between Russia and China and Japan. Okay, the Russo-Japanese War with a political cartoon. Remember that. There's also a war between China and Japan in 1894. The Meiji Restoration, that's Japan, dealing with the daimyo, the soldiers, the warlords that were very fierce and fighting a lot, and how they get stripped of their lands, and an imperial army was formed based on compulsory military service. Very important, those dates, the timeline at the bottom of your chapter 7 study guide. Make sure you go back to review this document and are familiar with all of those items on that particular timeline. And then all the bell ringers from this week. Very important. Dealing with the person that went to Canton and was impressed. The political cartoon depicting the Russo-Japanese War. The qualifications to be a missionary in China. Those were things from the bell ringers. So, with that being said, make sure that you review your information thoroughly. Make sure you go back and review any of the videos that you need to, and be prepared for your week 7 quiz on Friday. If you are in a extended class, you will be having that quiz today. So make sure that you watch this video and you prepare your information and you're ready to take your quiz. Thank you and have a great day.